On occasions like this. First of all, we'll go through the health and safety of the asset. If there's a fire or you need a fire alarm, leave the leads to the left and walk out. Let's go to the top main door, out of the car park, and wait there on the inside. Names of everybody here and we'll do a count there. Okay? Right then, we'll move straight on to the meeting. What we're going to do tonight, I'll explain it so you won't get confused. We're going to run it as an ordinary town council meeting for community governance. That means that I'll be in standing orders when we set off. That means there's no interruptions. Then, after I've been through the minutes of a previous meeting, I'll then suspend standing orders and the Chief Police Commissioner will be able to take over and answer the various questions that the general public have sent into it and go through the format. After that, when the Police Commissioner's finished, then I'll go back into standing orders and we will continue our meeting. The reason for that is, if there's some salient points that come up, we can actually action them tonight because I've got the committee and the council here and we have rights on that. And we can actually action that straight away. So it won't be, we'll look at it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 weeks. We'll look into it tonight. Okay? So, we'll go ahead. Welcome to the Community and Governance meeting. I hereby summon for a meeting of the Community and Governance Committee to be held at the Market Drayton Centre, Frogmore Road, on Thursday, the 5th of September 2019 at 7:30 p.m. First of all, we'll go to apologies.
Yeah, Councillor Irwin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Beckett as well. Jill Beckett.
Secondly, we go on to disposable interest. Members are reminded that they must not participate in the decision or voting on any matter of which they have a disposable pecuniary interest and should leave the room prior to commencement of the debate. However, if you notice halfway through that debate that you do have an interest, then you can mention it anyway, and then so a public session. Members of the public are invited to question the council and committee on local issues, provided that they intimate their intention to do so at Town Park on noon on the day before the meetings. Questions may be answered during the session or deferred for the notice of chairman will select the order of the matters to be heard. Each speaker will be limited to a period of 3 minutes or a maximum of 15 minutes total to the public session. That's up to chair's discretion. Are there any questions? Thank you. That's great. That's good. Right, we go on to the minutes. To agree and confirm the minutes of the Community Governance meeting held on 27th of June 2019. Now, for people who are not quite sure how to do this, we don't read that word for word. What we do is we go through each heading on the paper, so I'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4. The people who've been at the meeting will know all about it. If you did want a copy of this, at least some of them.
Yes,
there are some of them. Okay? So, we'll go straight to number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Opposed, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded, Chair.
Okay, those for? Those against? Those abstaining? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now be suspending standing orders, and this is to give the Commissioner of the Police Force a chance to introduce himself. He's a lot taller than me, so you do it a lot easier. Do you need a speaker? Do you need the...
I think I should be okay. I'll test to make sure. Can people hear me at the back? Or I don't know if everybody needs a hearing loop. No, the lady there, so I will use the...
I'll just look the councillors to resolve the standing orders. Do I have a seconder for that? A seconder. Those for? Those against? Okay, standing orders are now.
I will use the mic because I think there's a lady over there that's struggling to... Is that better? Excellent. So, thank you, Chairman. My name is John Campion and I'm a Peace and Crime Commissioner for West Mercia. So I act as the governance for the police across the counties of Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Shropshire, including Telford and Wrekin. So I'm not an operational police officer, I'm not the Chief Constable, I am the governance for the peace on behalf of the community. Directly elected, I'm elected by you at the ballot box, and indeed you get 4-year terms, and there will be another Peace and Crime Commissioner elections next year. So what is it that I do compared to the Chief Constable? So first of all, I take an oath not to interfere into operational matters, so first of all, so if the chairman is suspected of something, I can't suggest to the chief that he should be investigated in it, or indeed if he is doing something he shouldn't be doing, I can't tell the chief not to do it. I cannot and must not interfere with the operational independence of our warranted officers. What I do is I set the police budget, so the amount that you pay in council tax I set, and indeed the money we receive from government I receive. I own all the police property, I own the buildings, I own the kit, I own all of the assets associated with policing on behalf of the public. I also get to hold the Chief Constable to account. Now, not that long ago, you became Chief Constable after many years of being called Sir or Ma'am, and indeed, once you were Chief Constable, you were an almost godlike figure, accountable to nobody and virtually impossible to remove. Well, things have moved on since then, and indeed, Chief Constables are accountable to commissioners, and the commissioners are accountable to the public. Now, that's not me second-guessing his operational judgment, that's about ensuring there is the right scrutiny of the actions of the police force that is, first of all, with our money, and second of all, in our name. We give our consent to be policed. And that check and balance is done through commissioners, and that's a fairly newish power since 2012, and I do that through a structured scrutiny process done on a cycle to make sure that we're going through all of the business areas. But I am the check and balance around ensuring that policing priorities are in line with our needs as the community. And lastly, one of my statutory duties is about appointing the Chief Constable. So the Daily Mail would call it the power to hire and fire a Chief Constable. Well, it's not quite as simple as that, you'll be very pleased to hear. It's very complicated to do, and there are lots of checks and balances. But ultimately, we have the right, first of all, to appoint, because in the old days, it was the Home Secretary that had a say over who was our Chief Constable, and they never would have met them or indeed been through an interview or anything like that with them, but they had the say. And indeed they were virtually irremovable. Well, now it's not. If they do something that they shouldn't be doing, in the same way all of us are accountable to those that employ us, I have the ability to remove. It's very rarely used, you'll be pleased to hear, but that power is now here. So I just wanted to set that out to start with so that people understand what it is I do. I'm joined by my two uniform colleagues today. Primarily, it is my role to answer your questions, absolutely, but if there are operational things that we need an operational answer on, Scott and Jake from your local team, it is right that they will be able to assist in those areas. And with the Chair's discretion, once I've sort of had a go at answering some of the ones that we've had submitted in advance, happily open it up to the floor and take any questions that you might have that are not alluded to. That's absolutely fine. Just before I move on to the questions that have been submitted, it's worth me just picking up some of the very high-level bits and pieces that is happening in West Mercia, the relevant update, as it were. Firstly, hopefully you will have seen in the last couple of days a commitment from government that we've got 20,000 police officers coming. There's lots of caveats these days, isn't there? Normally we have to wait to see the devil in the detail. At the moment it's a bit like, well, we'll hope the government survives long enough to send us the detail, and then we'll wait to see it. But they seem keen on delivering their promise, which again sounds unusual, but we had the announcement yesterday that they're going to pay the money for this year and for next year, that we'll see an additional 6,000 recruited over the next 18 months or so nationally. For us in West Mercia, that means roughly 40 to 80 over the next 18 months. But we'll see the detail as it comes out in the coming weeks. We have already grown over the last 6 months through some rise in the council tax precept that you have paid, and through a bit of money from government, we've added an extra 215 officers to our establishment, which is, for us, the biggest uplift and indeed takes us to the highest level since 2012 of police officer numbers. But what difference does that make to you guys? Well, here locally, the patrol shift, so that's the cover for 24/7 policing, has had an additional 1 per shift added, so that's an additional 5 officers. We have some more resources in our teams that respond to emerging crime threats and our investigations. We have more officers in some parts of our safe and neighbourhood teams that perhaps were depleted before. So those 215 extra officers will have enabled us to put some meat back in some of the areas where it had gone down to the bone. But these additional officers, provided they get delivered, I think will indeed make a bigger difference, especially out here in what I call our market towns, those that aren't our big urban centres that will always have a police presence and a good police presence, about ensuring that we have got the right resources out here as well. As part of that uplift, I have the support and reassurance from the Chief Constable that everybody will feel the benefit. Whilst there are more officers being stationed to your police station just down the road, we want everybody to feel the benefit. So confidence, satisfaction needs to be going up, crime levels need to be going down. I'm an old-fashioned, simple kind of chap. I want to see the improvements from the investment. You had to pay more in council tax, we asked you to pay more, and it seemed to be the support for it, and you paid it. You've got to get the benefit from them, and that's been my commitment. And crime, whether we believe statistics or not, crime is coming down. The statistics show that crime has dropped. But there are some worrying crime types that haven't dropped. Some antisocial behaviour, we still have too much of that going on in our community, causing concern and indeed blighting some people's lives. And those are areas that we, of course, will continue to tackle. And we'll get into those in the questions. The last thing I wanted to touch on before moving to the question was around prevention. Our uniformed colleagues can run around all day long dealing with the consequences of crime, dealing with the 999 or the incidents as they happen, but we will never get ahead. I was around in policing in the mid-noughties where we were up over another 200 plus officers to we have now, but we were still running around busy. We are never going to get ahead unless we start to deal with some of the things causing crime, and prevention measures are vitally important. And 2 of the elements to which I am very keen in promoting, and a whole raft of them, so don't think there are just these 2. First of all is smart water. Being burgled is a really dreadful thing. It is an invasion into your private space where you should feel safe. Smart water, as part of the We Don't Buy Crime project, is about marking your property with smart water, taking some very basic crime prevention steps, loads of stickers and things to let burglars know that your property is marked by smart water, and it's academically back shown reduces the chance of burglary, increases the chances of getting your property back if the worst does happen, and increases the chance of the person being caught with stolen goods but actually being held to account through the courts for it. Too often, police officers are coming across people with what they believe to be stolen goods, but they are unable to connect it to a crime. And smart water is a big, big, important part of that. So I, as Commissioner, work with places like your parish councils to offer smart water to residents. So I offer some funding into that, and indeed in loads of parts of West Mercia, we've had some real successes in rolling out having smart water communities. The other is CCTV. CCTV plays a role in being kept safe. I recognise that I or the police don't own any CCTV systems. They're all owned by councils or community groups, but I recognise police use CCTV as part of their role, and indeed it contributes towards people feeling safe out there in their communities. So there is a pot of money that the local councils and others are able to draw down to invest in local CCTV, and I know that's available in all parts of West Mercia, here in North Shropshire too. £1.25 million I will have invested over 3 years of your money into CCTV across the force area, and that money here is available if that's a priority for your local community. So moving on to some of the questions, you'll have to forgive me as I attempt to précis some of them because some of them are a little long and so I will have a go. And it is a theme through some of the questions around antisocial behaviour in some of our car parks and indeed what is happening around that being sorted. And I'm sure Scott or Jake will want to clarify in a while. I see, from a commissioner's point of view, that enforcement is part of that. Those causing the harm have to feel the hand of the law, as it were, to ensure that they know we are there to catch them when their cars are modified illegally, or indeed they're using it in a way that's either antisocial or illegally. But we're never going to be everywhere. So therefore, some of the designing out issues, such as barriers on car park gates when the car park is not in use, for example, are very simple steps to stop that happening. What I would say is it's easy for me to stand here as Commissioner to say you can't just expect the police to fix it all the time. I also am willing to be part of solutions. So if there is somewhere that does require some barriering and the bill is £1,000, we have the option through our community fund to contribute towards getting those projects done. So there are a couple of car parks that are named within the questions that I've had in, and if there are some sites that it does need some physical measures from, and there are some solutions being proposed, we are not unafraid to be part of that. We're never going to provide all of the funding because this is a team effort, but we will, of course, always be part of it. The other part of this question goes on to talk about performance stats and indeed crime types relating to Market Drayton and indeed how that compares to some of the reductions elsewhere. I come back to crime overall is falling, crime in some crime types isn't, but if people don't feel safe in their community, it's irrelevant what the crime types are. We could be the safest community in the world, and yet if we don't feel safe, if we think we're going to get bowled or there's antisocial behaviour, then there's no benefit to it. So part of my drive is, yes, we do look at the crime types, and yes, they do drive some of our behaviour, but we've got to be out there reassuring, working with the community to make sure that we understand their priorities and making sure that we are responding to them. And it's very difficult not to find a patronising way to say this, so forgive me if I sound patronising, I don't mean to. Our community, and myself included, don't always worry about the things that we should worry about. The threats to us in our community aren't always the things that we worry about. We are more likely to be defrauded online as an individual than we are to be assaulted in the street or to be robbed in the street, yet we probably worry about the latter more than the former, and all those kind of things. So my mission has always been, we must deal with the things that we should worry about, but also do enough around the things that people are worried about, i.e. in line with the community's priorities. And lastly, on this particular question, it talks about the future of Market Drayton Police Station. It's very lovely. It was built in a time when there was a lot more money sloshing around. We're not going to close it. We're not planning on closing it. There are no plans to close it. I know the geography in this part of Shropshire particularly well. It's not necessarily easily connected to other parts of it as easily as we would want. There are no plans to remove the very shiny and new-ish building. My pitch to you would be, though, if we are looking at change, it will be either to another building if there was an opportunity to develop it, and I don't think there is currently, or indeed to get other people to come and help us share the overheads. Successfully in other places, maybe not here in Market Drayton, we've worked closely with health, with fire, with others who we can share the cost of running a building with. Knowing the site here, I'm not certain that is a possibility for us at the moment, but never say never. So the next one, and there's only two more after this, and I'll be quicker with the next ones, I promise, so we can get on to questions, was around antisocial behaviour, and indeed the fact that the stats show that antisocial behaviour is on decline, and it goes on in effect to say that's not how it feels. And I agree with them. I agree that antisocial behaviour doesn't feel like it is in decline, the way people are using their vehicles antisocially, the way sometimes we as humans are acting in an antisocial way. It does feel like it is rising. It's not necessarily It's not necessarily in line with how it feels. There is then some question around the force's priorities, and they feel a little fluffy against what perhaps the community feel are the harder sides of crime. And I just wanted to restate that the force's priorities are safer people, safer homes, and safer roads. Too many people are dying or being killed on our roads. Too many people are unfortunately being the victim of domestic violence, serious domestic violence in our communities, and indeed too many people are being exploited, whether it be older vulnerable people or younger vulnerable people. So those will always be the central priorities of the force, and it's right that they are there. But that doesn't mean, as I said earlier, that our community's priorities aren't the priorities of the police, because they always have to be. We have to do the things that we need to do, but we also have to ensure we've got the community's priorities. And the next one, as we've got here, is around being pushed around, as in community issues, as it were, being passed from pillar to post. It's not our responsibility, it's somebody else's, and them not getting solved. And I think parking is quite a good one. Parking is decriminalised in this part of the world, so it's not a police matter, as it were. It is a civil enforcement matter for the council. Well, I, as a citizen, often roll my eyes when somebody tells me it's not their responsibility, because it's quite right, it's not our responsibility, but we are part of the system. So I'm very supportive of the force, ensuring that we push back to those who are responsible to take a lead role, but that doesn't mean that we don't act in support of our partners. In the same way we would act in support of another emergency service, we would act in support of the local council. So I would hope and expect that the Safer Neighbourhood teams based in your communities would understand those problems, and indeed be galvanising those whose responsibility it is to act, but also acting in support of them. Sometimes there are some police powers that can assist, sometimes there aren't. Sometimes police involvement assists, sometimes it doesn't. And I would want to make sure, and I know it does happen, that Safer Neighbourhood teams will make those choices. And as our numbers come back up, police officer numbers come back up, I would expect the more qualitative things to get more attention, the benefit to us, the community. And the very last one on my list, he says, I'm going to flip through, and then we'll move on to questions. And it does relate to one earlier around boy racers, and indeed relates to another car park again. There are those who we know who are doing it, type thing, and it then goes on to say, you know, does somebody need to be killed, etc., etc. When people post about them on social media because they are angry and no, etc., etc., wondering if the police are happy to be held accountable when lives are lost and they choose to do nothing. I would say, first of all, the police have a number of issues that are presented to them on an hourly basis. There will always be a priority to things, but there is nothing that is never dismissed or not interested in. Not everything is going to get the immediate response. And my plea to the community always would be, if we know somebody that's causing harm, and it's a threat to life or property or an ongoing crime act, always ring 999, make that judgment, give a ring. You're never going to be told off unless you're ringing to say your pizza hasn't arrived or you've lost the television remote. But if you think it's an emergency, then ring. And if it's not emergency, and you still want to let the police know, use the non-emergency system, the 101. And if it's a big wait on the 101 when you ring, it's a non-emergency, either ring back later or choose one of the other channels. We advertise the local Safer Neighbourhood teams' direct mobile numbers and their email addresses on West Mercia's website. And if it's a non-emergency issue saying, I saw X, Y, and Z earlier, this was the car or this was the person that's doing it, giving that intelligence, the eyes and the ears of the community that we are, into our law enforcement could be the difference between a bit of a puzzle that we didn't know, or indeed we didn't know what the picture looked like, or indeed it could be irrelevant. But if we don't do it, we won't know which it is. That vital bit of evidence or vital bit of information could be the thing that enables some action to be taken. Now, some of you in the room will say, it's all very well, we do that and nothing happens. A lot of the time it does happen, but we're not good at telling you something has happened. I had my water meter seen to a couple of weeks ago because there was something the matter with that. I phone up, I get an appointment booked, I get an email straight afterwards telling me when the appointment is, even though I was booked in a few minutes before. I had a text message the night before telling me the chap was coming, even gave me his name, and indeed then I had an email after he'd been to see whether it was good enough or not. That is all done from an automated basis. The police are currently working on very arcane systems that don't have some of the customer service tools associated with that you would expect in 2019. Part of my mission in modernising the force is to give them that tools. So whilst they're very busy doing their jobs, the customer service tools I think we now expect they haven't got the benefit of, but they are coming. They're coming down the road. I have chosen to prioritise things like smartphones, body-worn videos, laptops, to get them and support them out there in the community doing their job. But the next bit, the bit in the fundamental redesign of the IT that we work on, takes a little longer and is a little more difficult to do. But our intent is there. We will get better at closing the loop of information to you, the community. But don't give up on us in the meantime, because without you, without the intelligence, without that bit of nugget of information, we're never ever going to succeed in serving you well. So, I've had a go at pricing some of the questions. I didn't get to all of them, but happily now move on to open questions.
Right then, what I don't want to do is have one person dominating the whole night. So, if you want a question, put your hand up. I'll nominate you to answer it, or give your name and who you represent, if you are representing, or for what area you're at. Okay? So, off we go. I'd like to use one hand at least. Gentleman in the red.
Malcolm Gray. I'm horrified to hear you describe dangerous parking as having become decriminalised. And my inquiries with the council, believing from some other source that it was their responsibility, was rebuffed. So I'm really not sure who do I talk to about the bloke at the end of my road who parks opposite a junction in a dangerous fashion.
So a slight either misunderstanding of what I said or indeed me not putting it clearly. So parking, so contravention of the order, the double yellow lines, or indeed the road traffic order that is there, is a decriminalised matter. A moving vehicle offence, i.e. somebody causing an obstruction or others, would still be a matter that the police would deal with. Now sometimes an obstruction matter can be dealt with by a contravention of a TRO, and sometimes it does need an officer to move, but everyday parking enforcement, the contravention of double yellow lines, for example, is indeed a decriminalised matter.
Sorry, they're entirely different things. I'm talking about somebody parking at the end of the T-junction. I'm trying to come out from my road, and this individual is constantly there. The number of near misses when I'm teasing my car out, and there are traffic coming, trying to avoid him because he's parked in a stupid place, in what I always considered was an illegal place, and I can't find anybody that would enforce it.
So as I said before, there is the potential that can be enforced both ways, because if there is a legal road traffic order there, it can, and their parking convention of it, then they can be given a ticket in that way. But I would suggest to you that it's worth getting the name of your street and worth getting you in touch with whoever your safe neighbourhood team is, so that they can also have a look at the problem, because I don't know obviously the area that you're referring to, but if it is something that is dangerous, then that is something your SNT can come and have a look at.
I'm sure it is dangerous, and it's all over Market Drayton.
Okay, Councillor Croft.
Thank you. Yeah, Royal Croft, I'm a town councillor. John, community speed watch schemes. 10 years ago, we had a whole team of volunteers set up, raring to go, and we were told for all sorts of reasons the scheme wasn't going ahead. And we lost those volunteers. We've now got yet another team of people willing to volunteer their time to man a speed watch scheme. and it's just dragging on. The guy who's organising it was telling me that he's been quoted health and safety, he's been quoted lack of equipment, he's been quoted just better than the government for excuses. The thing that's really annoying is the fact that in Loggerheads and Morton Say, there are schemes operating by Staffordshire. They operate on A roads and they're operated by volunteers. Why is it taking so long to get a scheme going in Market Drayton and Wall, and why is there such a difference between the safety standards or the training requirements in Shropshire as opposed to Staffordshire?
So, for those that don't know, Community Speedwatch is a group of volunteers who would get some training. There would be the sites that they can do some speed measuring in is assessed, risk assessed, and provided they put out the right signage and indeed act safely, they would do some speed measuring in a location, and those registrations would be noted, those that are exceeding the speed limit, and then West Mercia would write to those individuals and warn them. And if there are some regular numbers that come up, they might get a visit from a police officer, etc., etc. But it's about warning people that they are contravening the speed limit, and indeed reminding them that they should be changing their behaviour. Community Speedwatch is only used when we assess the area as the speeding as not being particularly bad. Because if the speeding problem is bad, above a certain percentage over the speed limit, then we should be taking enforcement action. We should be using either the safety camera partnership, you know, the vans that you see, or the motorcycles that they use, or indeed local police officers doing some enforcement so that those can get tickets. In West Mercia, we choose that we don't do that on, we don't do Community Speedwatch on fast roads, so we only do it on 30s and 40s, and we only do it where we don't then consider there to be an enforceable level of speeding. I inherited only 20 schemes in West Mercia across the whole of those 4 upper tier authority areas. We've managed to double it in the last couple of years, so we're up to 40. Now, I want to make any community that it is appropriate to have get access to it. So it's not an issue of kit, because I've provided the kit. Sometimes it is a bureaucratic process of getting the sites assessed and indeed getting the safe way of doing it. But my commitment is, if it's right and sensible, a community can do it, they should be able to do it. But if you want to go and stand out there and indeed be that visible presence, you're assisting us, so therefore, great. And this sounds critical of Staffordshire, because I suppose I am and I'm not. I take my operation advice from our Chief Constable, and that's the standards that he set around safety, hence why the environment that we do our Community Speedwatch in. But nothing is set forever, so if it's appropriate to review it in some point, I will. I've taken a note back, going out back at headquarters as to what's holding things up, and we'll see whether a code from my office can release it. Because if you've got a group of committed individuals that want to do it, then great. Because I come back to something I said earlier, there are too many people being killed or seriously injured on our roads, and in the same way, something called Operation Snap, I don't know if you've heard of it, which is a scheme where those drivers who catch other drivers on their dash cams doing something they shouldn't do can send the footage to the police, and then the police will assess it, and either they might give them a ticket, they might give them some advice, they might do all kinds of different things. That might be the intervention through that Community Speedwatch, that letter through the post that says, oh, maybe I do need to stop driving like an idiot type thing. And for me, they are invaluable. So I'll see what's holding things up, and we'll see whether we can't get it moving.
Okay, and you just understand, John, that your remit is to make sure we have efficient policing, make the most use of our... Can you speak up so everybody else? I understand that your remit, John, is to provide efficient policing services in the area. And the second remit, which people may not be aware of, in fact, to provide sufficient support services in the event of crime and things like that. Perhaps you could explain a bit about how you've taken steps to become more efficient as a police force, and secondly, what support services are available, in case people in this room don't know what is available.
Absolutely. So I'm charged in law for commissioning an efficient and effective police force. The Chief Constable is charged in law in delivering an efficient and effective police force. There's a distinction there that I like, and we actually try and protect here in West Mercia. I don't know about you, but I think I speak for most people. They don't give their money either through council tax or through their income tax for people like me. Whilst my mom thinks I'm excellent and others, I'm a necessary evil. The machinery supporting policing, the HR, the IT, all the other bits and pieces, we're a necessary evil. I give my council tax because I want to see frontline police officers doing the job that they do for us. So my mission has been about ensuring the machinery is as efficient as possible. In 2016, when I got elected, only 37% of the budget of the 202 million was spent on police officer pay and overtime. Now, when it says policing over the door, I don't think that's the right percentage. I don't know what the right percentage is, by the way, but I know that one isn't. Today, we spend 225 million, so we're spending 20 plus million more, and we've got it up, I think, to just under 54%. So we're going in the right direction. We are ensuring that the money you give us, more of it's spent on policing. It sounds really dull and bureaucratic, and I'm not quite sure how I turn it into an election slogan next year, but I think it's got to be central to what I do. And it's been partly of how we've been able to afford the extra 215 officers that are currently being recruited and will be with us by the end of this calendar year. And I'm going to do more. I'm proud in terms of the last 3 years being the lowest in the country of council tax increases for policing. And you might say, well, I've just paid 10% more. How are you the lowest in the country? Well, I was the lowest. I could have gone higher last year, but I didn't because I think 10% is a lot of money when wages aren't rising, pensions aren't rising to the same amount. So efficiency, dull and boring as it is, will always be my driver in terms of making machinery match fit. Effective as well, so they get the right stuff. It's not drive to being the cheapest, but it is about ensuring we get good balance of efficiency and economy. The other around support services, as the Commissioner world when we came in 16, also got a role to do with victims. More often than not, if you're victimised in our society, if you're a victim of a crime, whether it be low level or more serious, I don't think we necessarily get the greatest of service always. We've been a bit one-size-fits-all as an organisation sometimes. Well, if we kind of understand what you need, we might have this and that should do, as it were. Well, I'm quite a resistant individual, I think, and if I was burgled, I'd like to think I would bounce back and indeed I would cope, but I might not. Or indeed, if say an elderly person in a remote location is burgled, or their outbuilding is burgled, that might mean that they wouldn't feel comfortable living independently. Well, my view is that action of that person shouldn't impact so heavily on that person's life. So part of my mission has been to shape our victim services to support that person to cope and recover. We should look at you as an individual and try and meet some of your individual needs rather than, well, this is what we do, it either works or it doesn't. We launched earlier this year the Victim Advice Line, which is a service that is run by the police, but you wouldn't know it, that sits in the control room, that coordinates the victim services. So if you're the victim of a burglary, they'll be your single point of contact to how you get a bit of support if you need it, and they'll work out with you if you do need the support. And that's a big change for us. We are investing more in those types of services because academia shows if you're the victim of crime, and certain crime types especially, you are more likely to be re-victimised, and indeed then there is always the potential for you to enter the criminal world as well in terms of how you become vulnerable. So victim services will be my central plank of what I do. My mission is to do more of it. We've had a good step forward in establishing VAL, but we need to do more of it. So part of my commitment is working out what we do next, because I want to be on the side of those having something done to them rather than those that are doing the perpetrator side.
Chap in the back with the blue and grey shirt.
You just talking about it's your job to give us efficiency and value for money for the taxpayers. In March this year, I attempted to stop a group of lads vandalising a telephone box, which resulted in 5 of them attacking me. Broke my shoulder, had 2 operations. 5 months later, I still haven't had the police round to take a statement from me. So would you say I've had value for money?
Well, I wouldn't say you've had value for money, no. I would also say you haven't had the service that you would have expected. I don't know anything about the situation other than what you've just described to me. But the mere fact that you don't feel well supported means that something's gone wrong somewhere. And for me...
You talk, sorry, again, but you also talk about CCTV.
Let me have a go at answering you, and I'm sure the chair will let you come back at me.
Okay.
There are times 10,000 calls per week of service that West Mercia get. Some of those are not going to get a good job. Some of those are not going to get the right response, they're not going to get the right service. But part of my mission and our mission is when we don't get it right, we are able to sort it out afterwards. They call it service recovery, but I would more prefer to call it putting it right afterwards. And if we haven't responded to the incident in the right way, or indeed the victim in it or the person calling hasn't felt that they've had a good service, we know that early enough and we respond to it. Because, and I advise nobody here to get involved in something. But if they do, then good on you, because I'd like to think I would as well. And indeed, I would want to make sure you've got the right support. That's why, because I would advise nobody to do it. But you know, if you do it, good on you. And then to not get the support that you felt that you should have got makes it even worse, doesn't it? So
it's not so much even the support. It's like 5 months. You haven't took a statement. And people have got away with it.
You'll be pleased to know I don't take the statements. But I'll be happy to take some details from you afterwards.
Well, I did submit a question, but you haven't read that one out. You've probably got it there still.
I think the best way to do it is if you get your incident number, which you should have anyway, give it to the police sergeant and look into it from then on. That'll probably be the better way of doing it.
It is ongoing.
Okay.
The other point I wanted to make as well, that we're talking about CCTV, investing more money on CCTV. If we're not checking the CCTV that we've already got, what's the point of spending more money on it?
Well, the CCTV, we've been told that the commissioners have a certain amount of monies to be set aside. I think we as a council will discuss that, which we have
We haven't got the resources to go
to get it of good enough quality to do prosecutions with. Because at the moment, I believe this is a good enough quality. That was very good. Well,
It's not about the quality, it's about having the resources officers to go and download it. When they don't do that, it overrides, so they haven't got it anymore. There's no point you could have a million cameras around it.
Well, when we go back into session, I'll put it to the councils then, and we'll bring it up. Okay?
So just to pick up one of the points the gentleman's just referred to around the resources to collect CCTV. We're part of an organisation that's 3,500 people. We've always got the resources to do the things that we need. Sometimes organisationally we haven't organised to do it in the right way. Now I know that makes your incident no better, but we have always got the resources to do the things that we need to do. And my view as Commissioner is exactly the same as the Chief Constable's. If there is a viable line of investigation for something, then we should be exploring it. So if it's about collecting CCTV, we should be collecting. If it's about forensic opportunities, we should be collecting those as well. So the more, I had a quick flick through my pack, I couldn't see your question, but maybe it's hidden in there somewhere. I don't like what I've heard in terms of your experience, and it's not the way that we would want to do things, but I come back to happily have a chat to you afterwards and we'll see whether I can assist or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
Keith Mycock, Hadley Parish Council. The instance of cybercrime on the internet is obviously on the increase. Are there any personnel at all in the Mercia Police Force who are involved in that?
So, yes, is a short answer. It's a bit like the tsunami coming over the seawall, though, because you hear a lot in the newspaper around county lines drugs, for example, which are those in, say, Merseyside or the West Midlands or London, dealing drugs in our market towns. Now, we can understand that as a concept, can't we? Because, they're having to travel here on the train or in the car, and we can try and catch them, or we can go and target them in their home areas, can't we? That traditional crime fighting. Cyber is so different. First of all, there are some government-sponsored cyber crimes that are going on out there, but also there are the exploitation. Who'd have thought, I'm 43 years old, who'd have thought when I left school that today we'd be worried about children being sexually abused live over the internet with people paying to watch it, and indeed that happening thousands of miles away in another country. Who never thought that was where that we would end up? And for me, we as a society haven't adapted fast enough to deal with it. And are we ever going to be match fit? Even if all 2,000 of our officers were dealing with a cyber threat against our community, I don't think necessarily they would be. But there is a big chunk of resource within West Mercia. We also work regionally in something called a regional and organised crime group. They have a very specialist cyber team who also deals with the threat. There is also part of the NCA, the National Crime Agency. Again, there is another big cyber team. And we get on a daily basis packages from those organisations to us as a police force saying these people are involved in this alleged crime here, get investigating type thing. So there is lots of activity out there, but my warning or my health warning with that is it is not enough. And we've seen in the last couple of days the government's pledged around 20,000 police officers, and it's the right thing and it's a good thing and all the other bits and pieces, but the hard fact is tackling cybercrime isn't about a uniformed police officer. It's about having the right tech and the right tech-skilled people dealing with it in that cyber environment, which I don't think we are very good at, the fighting back part.
So there's no contact with any organisation within Mercia, a member of the public? So,
Yes, yeah, either via our normal crime reporting or indeed via our more specialist on the West Mercia website. There are lots of safety advice online, but also the more economic crime side of cyber fraud. Cyber fraud for business, again, is a very poor state in my humble opinion, but that's a national problem, not necessarily just a local one, but absolutely through your normal crime reporting mechanisms.
Yes.
I'd just like to, it's not so much a question, more an observation. Listening to this gentleman who's been assaulted and not...
Could you speak up, please?
Listening to the gentleman that's been assaulted and not had a police officer visit him over 5 months. It's not an isolated incident, because I personally know of someone else that was seriously assaulted in Market Drayton earlier this year. And he also didn't get a visit from a police officer. And it was a very serious assault by a number of people. He did eventually get a visit after 5 days. I don't know if that visit would have happened if I hadn't been badgering.
One of the questions I want to ask on this one is, we have as you've already pointed out, a very nice £6 million police station that's only been owned a number of years, but it's never open to the general public. It's shut tight. There's police in it, there's the armed squad, there's the riot squad using it, everybody uses it apart from the general public. We pay for that station. As a town, we pay for that station, each individual person pays money towards the police. We'd like to know if it is ever going to be open, even on a part-time basis, so people can visit and actually speak to them, be behind the counter. Because face-to-face is one of the most important things you have.
So just coming back to the lady's question, the immediate threat is always dealt with immediately. So if there's an ongoing issue, then they will prioritise resources to come there. Sometimes investigations where the threat has passed, sometimes there is a lag as to when it is dealt with. But as I've said to that gentleman, I will pick up to understand what has gone wrong. But my expectation is that people have a service to which they are comfortable with. Part of the uplifting officer commitment from the Chief Constable is that they will have, in a non-emergency setting, they will have an appointment with a human being within 48 hours. So what I would always say is, if you're not getting the service that you expect to get, speak to some of the local supervision, and the inspector sergeant are all listed on the same way as the local officers are, directly, or indeed, I've got no problem coming to my office, because for me, it is never by design, it is normally by circumstance. So when things do go wrong, taking an opportunity early on to get them right. And I know that makes no difference to those who already feel they've had poor service, but in the future, if you don't feel you're getting the right service, please do say, and don't be afraid to come to me. All my details are on the website, so just pick up the phone or drop an email. Around the police station, so the Chief Constable is very clear in his prioritisation of resources. We will always, or in the current circumstances, be prioritising police officers, because we think that's what we need in the system. So the money to staff the counters we are using in relation to actual police officers. But the Chief is very clear, if there are people in the police station, then they should be using something called Open for Business, which is a board outside that says there is a police officer in the building, if you need us, come in.
Well, we as a town council would be very happy for police officers to use our foyer, and we put a chair in there. We've already discussed it a number of times, and we'd be quite happy.
And you've stolen my thunder slightly, because police stations aren't our only community bases. Part of the expectation is that police officers can set themselves up, or PCSOs can set themselves up wherever that is most useful for that particular community. We have smartphones and laptops to be able to work more remotely. I come back to, though, and it sounds like I'm being critical, we have been through a difficult period in West Mercia where the role between those working our safer neighbourhood teams and those dealing with our response, those emergencies, has been blurred because we've been in a lower level than we would want it to have been. We have seen our SMT officers blurring that work and dealing with the immediate emergency. But as the numbers rise, the expectation is officers, when they are in the building, they will make themselves available. They will be using community buildings to base themselves into. And indeed, I like seeing an officer having a coffee in a public setting if they want to take their refs in a public space, and I would be very supportive of that. But as part of their execution of their duties, they should be visible and indeed in the right places. But again, and I mean this with the greatest respect to the council and the audience, we are never going to be able to meet everybody's needs. I work complicated hours sometimes, so when would I want to go? It'd be unlikely I'd be available during the day to go and see somebody in the local police station. It's about how we serve everybody, and that's why accessibility for me isn't just police station open. It's about the direct access to people via the mobile numbers or the group email addresses, a greater presence online, but also being visible when we can be visible. There are access to things like mobile police stations, which sounds fancy, doesn't it? But what it really is a van with an awning to where we can set up and be for a couple of hours. There are lots of tricks, but we can only do that when we've got the bodies available to do it. So as they start to come up now, the expectation is you will see more of it, because it has been happening, but I understand there are concerns it's not been happening enough.
Okay, any more?
Yeah, just picking up on the antisocial behaviour, it's become apparent, especially to me, and other people may have picked up, recreational drugs seem to be readily available in the middle of the day. You see it happening. Many years ago, you perhaps step in and say something, try and intervene, but for the reasons the two people over there just said, you don't these days. I appreciate you guys are stretched, but these people are now starting to prey on the vulnerable, the old, to actually feed the habits. So it's where do we go and how do we address the situation? Because if there's no deterrent, they just continue carrying on. And this, probably applies to the lads on the car parks as well. It's just no deterrent. You just carry on.
So drugs cause huge harm in our society, and I don't like the term low level. I don't believe in perhaps the more liberal approach to things. I do believe that we should be, and quite rightly, enforcing the law, but that doesn't mean that police officers don't take a practical application of it, and it's right that they do. But I would say to any member of the public that thinks there is drug dealing or drug taking going on, tell the authorities. There might not be the initial response, but there will be the contribution to the bigger picture. County Lines, I touched on it earlier, has been in North Shropshire. There are people from other areas who prey on vulnerable people in our community, in your community, and exploit them for them dealing drugs to other vulnerable people. And a big part of the work locally has been dealing with it, and we've seen some national police resources here in North Shropshire dealing with those that have come from Merseyside and other places to deal drugs here. So there is a pushback, And I know we try and get it out in some of your local newspapers, and it's in the Shropshire Star when they have a big success. But a big drugs bust here this week might not be in court for another 18 months. And we often, by the time it gets there, we've forgotten. So we do need to do more. We do need to tell you what we are doing more, but we are often bound by any court process as it starts. But I would never ever say that West Mercia are soft on drugs, because they aren't. Is it happening out there? Yes, it is. Is it at a high level than we all would want? Yes, I believe it is. But always make sure you are saying, because then they can attempt to catch them. But what I would say, and it's something that we've all learned, not just West Mercia, I think Policing UK has learned through the county lines phenomenon over the last 5 or 6 years. It's a bit like whack-a-mole, that American game that kids play when a little thing pokes its head up and you have to whack it, and then another one pokes up here. Because as soon as somebody locally is taken out for dealing drugs, very quickly they are replaced by somebody. And these people are going off to prison, and they're of no consequence to Mr. or Mrs. Big back at wherever they are being controlled from. So we've not only got to deal with the local causes of that drug dealing, we've also got to deal with the big people. And very lastly, around, well, I'm on my hobby horse around drugs, we also, in our society, need to be stronger, and indeed it needs more money around dealing with those that are addicted. If we're dealing with those that are addicted to the substances that are being taken, the market would dry up, wouldn't it? We would have less people wanting to do it. But unfortunately, we seem to be seeing investment in drug and alcohol rehabilitation going down, not going up. And for me, that's making this job impossible. We work very closely with council and health agencies, but I just can't seem to shift it. We've got some really great rehabilitation centres here in Shropshire, but we aren't getting enough people through. And for me, we can lock up as many low-level drug dealers as we like. That's not going to solve our particular problem.
Right. The last question, we have one more question from the County Council here. Royal Croft.
Sorry.
And then we'll have to move back into Council.
Yeah, okay. Just, we've looked at a lot of the urban problems that we've got, but one thing that hasn't been mentioned is rural crime. You know, it's a big farming area, there's equipment going missing, cattle being injured or killed, slaughtered, and rustling still going on. What's the police take on that? Is it a developing department, rural crime, or is it something you haven't got the resources to tackle just yet?
So, no, and indeed it does happen. I've been out actually with some of the rural crime squads here in Shropshire, doing some of the overnight operations where they're tackling hare coursers, for example, who come across from other parts of the UK. So no, there are resources, not only specialist wildlife crime officers, there are also rural crime officers engaging with those communities that might be vulnerable in the rural areas or indeed have already been victimised. There is always more to do. One of the downsides of a rural community, I grew up on the Worcestershire, Shropshire, Clee Hills myself, we often don't report. We're not reporting enough, things are happening out there and we're not hearing. Part of my mission, part of the confidence I want to give to the rural communities is, tell us, don't just deal with it, tell us. Because we want to make sure we're building up the pictures and responding to it accordingly. One of the other things we are looking at, and it is under development, so hopefully something that is coming, we've got a smart water pack for a residential property. So we do a burglary prevention pack for a home, but we're in the process of developing one for a rural business or a farm. I want to make sure the 8,800 farms that we've got across West Mercia, they've all got an opportunity to help prevent themselves against that type of crime as well. Criminals are getting even smarter with things like trackers being on much more farm equipment than it ever was. We find them pinching it and then dumping it somewhere and then coming back a week later to see whether or not the police had there was a tracker on it. We will only get over those types of crimes through greater visibility. So I do believe as we start to see more officers based in our outstations, the Market Drayton of this world, you will see that greater visibility, which will also deal with them as they try and get around the tactics of things like trackers. I'm always interested in an idea. I always say this when I come to parish councils. If there's something around rural crime that we're not doing, an innovation somewhere, and I happily hear it, and indeed if there's a pilot to be run anywhere, always keen to do something, because I want to make sure our rural communities have the same confidence as our urban communities do, and at the moment I don't think they necessarily do.
Okay, thank you. Right then, we've now got to move back into standing orders, because we need to go through the council see if they want to do anything. So, it's all tight. If there's interest, we'll move back into it. Okay, lads, we'll now move back into standing orders. So, any questions from the councillors? Anything you want to raise that we've just been through? Councillor Allcroft.
Yeah, that we write to Shropshire Council and ask for their cooperation in fixing CCTV cameras on Towers Lawn car park by the end of November.
By the end of November. Yeah. And I'd like to add to that we look into where we should be placing them around the play areas.
Yeah, that's coming up on my committee in a couple of weeks' time.
That's on
But
the committee.
at the moment, my proposal is that we write to Shropshire Council, ask for their cooperation in fixing CCTV cameras in cooperation also obviously with the police on Towers Lawn, both A and B car parks.
Okay, is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Councillor Timber. Okay, those for? Those against? Those abstaining? That's unanimous. Anything else? If there's nothing there, I think we should be asking about this road safety issue. And that should be a letter sent into the appropriate people to check on that.
Yeah, on the
Road safety group.
on the speed team.
Yep.
Yeah.
That needs to be. We've already worked on that, so we
If we can ask,
set forward to expedite it.
yeah, if we can follow that up with the police commissioner and local police officers and find out where exactly and what exactly is happening at the moment, what's holding it up, and then move on from there.
Yeah. Is there a seconder?
Proposing. Who's proposing?
I'm proposing.
Proposing and
Seconded.
Thank you.
okay, those for. Against.
And also,
And also.
Smart Water, we'd like to know about the residential
That's the free
package.
question.
Somebody's coming out to talk to us.
That's
Right,
already been
okay.
done. Somebody's going to
Okay.
talk to us about household.
That's enough from me. I'll
What
shut
we'll do
up.
then is we'll put something in the town council saying this is probably where you get them from.
Right. Okay.
Anything else from councillors? Yes, Councillor Glover.
On the point that a gentleman here raised concerning what we would call illegal parking, contravening the Road Traffic Act, would it be a good idea to put this in the press and get members of the public to give us some idea of these locations? Because I know for a fact, as he has said, there are vehicles actually parking on junctions, and there is a ruling which states that you are not allowed to park within certain distance of a junction.
I suggest
And we've got Councillor Smith, the current mayor, who, as a retired fire chief, will tell us about various roads that he can't even get the appliance down.
Well, I suggest, Councillor, that you make a small working group within this around here and have a walk around the area, find out where these hot points are, report back, and then we can pass them on to the police.
Well, with due respect, I think we ought to engage with the public, get them to give us, so we can work
The
together.
public as well.
There's only a few of us walking around. I've already done things with fellow councillors already about other topics.
How would you propose to ask the general public?
Put it item in the press. We've got
In the press?
we've got Councillor Smith here, who is the crier. There's no reason why not. He can't go out
We
on the
have to ask
criers.
him first. If he puts it in the crier by himself, he then puts himself out of the discussion. So we have to go for. We have to be very, very careful on that.
Well, we can get someone else to do it then.
Or we propose we ask the
propose
crier.
that he puts it in there, then he can put it in there as a matter of information. If he puts it in there by himself, he won't be able to take part in any discussion further after that. So are you proposing that we put that information onto the crier?
Yes,
That's your proposal?
yes.
I'll second it. Great, thank you. Those for? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. Hard work sometimes, isn't it? Yes, Councillor Holcroft, I see you have.
Just one point. John mentioned, I think, when we were going through on this subject, question of photographs, the SNAP project. If people have got people who are parking dangerously, wherever it may be, then snap them either with the mobile phone or the car camera and pass it on to the police.
That's for driving offences, actual moving offences. For parking that wish to be reported, I would suggest that if a photograph's taken, it's sent to the local policing team for their information and for them to look at. Actual snap is solely for dash cams, moving traffic offences, reporting bad driving.
But you'd still go with a camera shot. That would be enough for you.
If you feel that the vehicle's parked dangerously, whichever, you can take a photograph to send in, and then that can be looked at over a period of time. Is it an isolated incident? Is that a regular occurrence? And I think that's what we have to differentiate between, is isolated do happen all over, but regular occurrences is something you can look at over a long term to achieve a resolution to everyone's satisfaction.
I know it's very unusual for an outsider to break into a council meeting, but on this occasion, I think it's absolutely fine. Okay?
My apologies.
Continue, Councillor. Don't worry, Councillor, continue. What do you want to do about these snaps then? I want to know.
Well, they go to
Okay.
police, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's just making it common. I'll let the press know.
Anything else? No? Sergeant, thank you very much for coming this evening. And thank you for the general public as well. It's nice to see so many people coming out on an event like this, because we never know what's going to happen. And I hope you've enjoyed or got some kind of information to take back on how the council reacts. The reason why we've run the whole meeting on this is we can action some of the things that happened tonight immediately, which is exactly what we've done. So thank you very much, and I now declare this meeting closed.